not doing something is also a choice. I can see how it could be better. Just this one more thing. I'll just work harder. And all of those are choices. They feel more proactive, can convince themselves that they're in control.
When they're not.
When they're really not.
They're really just paddling from
the duck,
event
the
event.
duck,
Yeah.
with the crazy feet underwater.
Yep.
You start to get into a pattern of this survival mode, and as you manage to make it through the next month and the next month, and you just sort of slowly keep, pushing things and moving things, and that stress state becomes a bit of the default.
The cortisol addiction.
Exactly.
Hi everyone, Liam here from O'Brien Palmer. Today I'm joined by Amanda Jones from Leadership Shapers. Amanda, thanks for joining us today. By way of introduction, Amanda has had a career in the insolvency profession dating back a few decades now, before having a career change and becoming a leadership and business coach. She has worked with a fantastic number of organisations to analyse what works in their business, what works for the people working in the business, and how they can reform their practices to make their businesses more profitable, but also better places to work for everybody involved. And I wanted to have her to join us today to have a chat about some of those topics, and in particular, the mindset of directors in businesses and things that they should be aware of. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Amanda, what's the number one issue that people seek you out for?
Usually there's people problems. So that these days tends to be the trigger, and it can often just be around performance, underperformance. A lot of times it's leaders just being really challenged in their roles. So I do work with a lot of leaders to develop their own capability, which often then translates to how they can get more from their people and their teams.
So when leadership or a leadership team in a business isn't functioning optimal, what are the sort of problems that we see in businesses manifesting because of that?
Yeah, so often it can be really centered around people's sense of stress, overwhelm, that being on the hamster wheel, not being able to see the wood for the trees, leadership in the weeds. I would say that's one of the things I hear a lot. Leaders needing to be able to take more of a, we talk about the idea of the balcony and the dance floor. Where are you? And often when the business and the teams aren't working effectively, leaders find themselves down on the dance floor, in amongst it, in the weeds, and particularly in larger organisations, the effect of that tends to be more isolated to the team itself. In a smaller business, if the leader is also the owner and they're stuck down in the weeds, I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yes, I do.
Then unfortunately, the flow-on effect from that can tend to be far more reaching and detrimental in terms of the actual financial performance. So we can really think of it as two parts. One is the people performance, and then the other is the business outcomes themselves.
As a practical to that, the number of times when we're interviewing directors about businesses that need restructuring or businesses that have failed, it's such a really common element for people to say, I took my eyes off the ball in leading this business because of whether it be personal issues, health related, focus on other challenges. To hear that there was a real disconnect amongst people about the provision of services, the cost of staff turnover, all those sorts of things obviously have a very significant impact upon the productivity and success of the business. But also, it's quite common to hear that has led to a very significant decrease in motivation from the leader or owner of the business through all levels. So sales decline, service provision is not what it ought to be, overall profitability is failing because of additional costs associated, just general efficiency. All these things are impacted negatively if we can't get leadership right. And I know from working with you personally that leadership, one of the core elements of leadership is mentality, headspace.
Yes, and you've really summed it up so well. And if I were to pull that all together into a single statement that I think kind of sums it up, is really it starts at the top. And I'll come to the headspace and that mentality piece in a moment. Everything that you're describing and that impact on the whole business. So I very much think about businesses and organisations really in those two parts. Like, we're there to be successful. Like, you want to make money, and that's great. I do believe that it is possible, and the way that we can do that most effectively is through people and having people engaged and motivated. You talked about that motivation piece, and how you do that is through effective leadership. The biggest influence then is what happens at the top. Yeah. So whether that is the single owner director, it's the CEO, co-owners, or the leadership team in larger organisations, getting it right at the top is most critical. And it takes that commitment, as you said, that headspace firstly, to be able to step back and recognise, you know what, this isn't actually working the way that I want to. And that might and often comes from the people themselves. So often I'm called in by leaders to say, you know, my leadership team or my team or management isn't working well. What I then look for is, okay, what role are you playing as the leader? And you know this
I do.
from first-hand experience.
The objectivity of being able to look at those issues is critical if you're wanting to restructure leadership in a business, and I can say that from first hand. But I could also recognise, as many people who might be watching this are, is that objectivity is particularly difficult when you are entrenched in the business, as opposed to being able to step outside and working on the business. I know that's a bit of a cliche phrase.
But again, I think we need to recognise that. And so often we see people who are really good at, I call it really great at their craft. So whether that's in professional services, lawyers, accountants, whatever it is, or you have a great product and you're so focused on getting that out to people, delivering the best service. The reality is you're in a business because you have a product or service that people want. Most likely you are passionate about that as well. So it makes sense that as either the business owner or the leader, that you want to be involved in the delivery, those business and services, that is in the business. And you're right, it can often then come at the expense of spending the time and giving yourself the mental capacity, because you might delude yourself that you are looking and doing the things as the leader. If your head and heart are still in the business and you're not giving yourself that headspace, either because you're not interested in it, and there can be a little bit of self-judgment in it as well, or you are convinced that you have to be in the business for it to work effectively. So there's a number of different reasons, and we might even go through that in a little more detail, just in terms of maybe some of the warning signs perhaps, or indicators. Yeah. However, you first have that awareness that things aren't on track, that's the moment to take stock.
Even before we get to the critical phases of business and where businesses are failing, there's an opportunity for people to step in and work on the functionality of their businesses and the people within them. What is the number one obstacle in your experience that prevents people from taking those opportunities?
I think judgment and fear. So there's a and I call people out on this, the word should. If you hear yourself saying, I should be able to do all of this, I should understand this, I should have the right team, I should have these sales, that's the moment to step back and say, okay, hang on a second, where is that should coming from? Who's telling me that? And then you'll find where that judgment is coming from. Really often it's coming from ourselves. There's something in us. Yep. And then we end up getting in our own way.
Well, in all aspects of our lives, we see people that are succeeding, people that, you know, inspire us and that we want to model what we're doing on. But so often we don't see everything that's happened underneath and behind the scenes to get there. So I should have a business with these sales, and I should have a leadership team that is functioning in such a way, because, you know, that's what we see, that's what we model ourselves on, that's what we want to achieve. It doesn't take into account all the work behind the scenes that might have gone into getting it there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have to say, I think the social media piece these days doesn't help that at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is rather ironic considering most of you, I'm hoping, are watching
Yes,
it on
that's right.
some form of social media.
We're using
that's
it for
not
good.
lost on that. Look, obviously, when we're talking to people and people are looking at this podcast, would be people who might find themselves in situations of extreme business distress. We're not necessarily looking at a business that does some tinkering around the edges. We're talking about businesses that are suffering from real financial difficulties, whether it be straight financial costs, changes in the profession, misadventure and misopportunity. You've worked in insolvency. You've got experience of working with directors in this space. What stops people from coming and asking for help?
Again, it's that fear piece,
Yeah.
mostly. I think also potentially optimism. It's almost that optimism overplayed. It will be okay if I just I'll just keep working harder, seeing a horizon where it could get better. But mostly it's that fear. If I stop, if I look, I'm not going to like what I see.
Yeah. The number of directors that told me that in the lead up to there needing to be an appointment, a formal restructuring or a liquidation, they've convinced themselves that there's this big sale that's about to land. I'm about to collect this big debtor and I'm going to be able to pay all of my debts. And, for whatever reason, that didn't happen. Or finally, after 6 months of, skating through from next big event that's going to save them to having that be the pattern of their life, a highly stressful and health damaging way of being, they finally have admitted it's not. I'm chasing my tail here. I'm never catching up. I have to do something about it.
Yeah, it's that, and it's being then forced into that decision. And what I often say to people is, not doing something is also a choice. I think that's really important because people can tend to almost leave things to destiny.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's that I can see how it could be better. Just this one more thing. I'll just work harder. And all of those are choices. They feel more proactive, but also it's, again, that acknowledgement that doing nothing is a choice. Mm-hmm. So people can convince themselves that they're in control.
When they're not.
When they're really not.
They're really just paddling from
the duck,
event.
Duck,
yeah.
with the crazy feet underwater.
Yep. It all looks serene, but it's not because you never get the opportunity to make the big changes that need to be made because you're so being bogged down in the details.
Yeah.
So, and because you don't know what it might look like on the other side if you were to let something go.
For sure. And most people are uncomfortable with that uncertainty. It's actually quite rare for someone to thrive in that. It's not, it does happen, but it's the exception rather than the rule. So people like certainty, and this is also quite counterintuitive, and you described it before, you start to get into a pattern of this survival mode, and as you manage to make it through the next month and the next month, and you just sort of slowly keep pushing things and moving things, and that stress state becomes a bit of the default. We actually get at a biological level accustomed to that. And I think about it as creating this sort of chemical cocktail for a certain state of being.
The cortisol addiction.
Exactly. And so even when things then start to improve, your body actually has a response to that, which is, hang on a second, you've changed the chemical cocktail on me. I don't like it. And we almost then create the circumstances that take us back to that high stressed, anxious survival mode. So we then create our own perpetuating cycle. In the meantime, the people around you, your team, in the business, also become primed for that certain dynamic. And even though it's not good, people fear change and the unknown, even if the promise of better is there, over the familiar known.
So we talk about people making decisions about their business. But you've also talked about the major influences today in people's decision making, and those were all emotions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think people will feel in their gut that there is something wrong, that their business is not performing the way it should be, their life is not what it should be or needs to be, that word should there.
Yeah.
People will feel it, even if they can rationalize their way out of those feelings, it doesn't stop them from feeling. So what advice would you give to anyone who has this niggling fear, this niggling emotion that there is something wrong?
Firstly, I love that you referred to the emotions, because what we're really talking about here, and is one of my favorite topics, is emotional intelligence. It's actually about being smarter about the feelings and just recognizing that those feelings are data. So it's actually as simple as recognize the data, seek to understand it, take it as information, not as you said, something to be suppressed and worked through and judged. I think people then have the feelings, but you're right,
this inherent
judge
belief that emotions are illogical or irrational.
They're really not. They're the most rational of everything. They're a biological response. So we can't control them. So emotions are just our bodies and brains releasing chemicals in response to something around us and something that's happened to us, and we can't stop them. What we can do is we can tune into them, see them as data, and then analyze it like we would a set of numbers in a spreadsheet or our accounts.
The tune in, I think, is interesting. It's the ability to step outside and say, I am feeling this, be aware of it, look at where it's coming from.
What does it mean?
Yeah, what's causing
that?
that?
What's the message?
And address those causes.
And what choices do I have? And if you choose to do nothing, that's okay, but do it with intention and know that you're making a choice. And then the final piece of the puzzle around that whole emotional intelligence, or EQ, is coming back to that foundation of why. Why am I doing any of this? Why is it important? Why step out of my comfort zone and do something different? Which hopefully, if you can tune into this early enough, is getting help.
So a lot of what we've talked about today has been quite theoretical, quite esoteric. Let's bring it back to the practical. What are some things that a business owner can do, practical steps that you might recommend for people who are finding that they have this feeling that something's not right, something's not working, and that there might be, something that needs to be done?
I would say the thing that you can do straight away is actually just stop. Just take a beat, take a moment, stop trying to push through it. And it could be 5 minutes. It could be 5 minutes to just disconnect and just stop and actually have the conversation with yourself around what's really going on here. So that's probably the first thing in that moment. Start with that. And I feel that creates, or has the potential just to create, a moment of clarity.
Clarity is fantastic. If you can start by thinking about it, I can tell you from my own personal experiences, take some time to write some of these things down. Write down how you're feeling. Write down what the pressures and stresses are. And when you have it all set out in front of you on a piece of paper, it can become a lot clearer than it is running around in circles inside your head.
100%. And it is a tip. And I do have clients who will call me in that state of overwhelm, not knowing how they're going to get through the next day of work. And I know that this is having a ripple effect to the people around them. And it's exactly what I recommend. Okay, you need to stop. I know you feel that you have to keep pushing through because there's so much to get done. You're actually not being effective. So stop. I love post-it notes. So pull out the post-it notes, post-it paper, whatever it is, whatever your process needs to be, but get it out of your head. And often it does amplify in our brains, and because we can't and are not making logical sense of it, it just feeds on itself. So as you said, writing it down and having a conversation, and if you don't mind me sharing
Please.
Some of our experience, is that when I've seen you in those states of mind, that's literally, I'll say to you, okay, tell me what is going on, and then you'll talk through it I'll write it down, and then I play it back to you, and pretty much without exception, as I've played it back, I can see you looking at it going, oh, actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was. And I can now see what I need to prioritize. I can now see what I can delegate and get support around. And that has, and I've seen the shift in you at that emotional level and the logical level as well. And what I know is that then when you step back into work mode with your team, it becomes productive rather than heightened and reactive. So then they actually support you, do what needs to be done, because they're also clear on what the priorities are.
So I've very much become aware that, you know, in my job, my role in my family, my role in my community, there are just so many factors, there's so many things flying around it all the time, that to be able to write those things down, and for me, I'm a narrative person. If I can put it into the story, this is how we got here, the next steps forward, what I want to do, that's me creating some logic out of that. It helps me get the results that I'm looking for. And that's what works for me. Whereas other people might be mind map type people, you know, to see it all visually graphed out or demonstrated might work for them. Everyone will have their own way of making sense of all that data, all that input, all those pressures, and creating something productive out of it. There
is also the AI piece as well. If you really are reluctant to speak to someone, to be able to, you know, if opening up and sharing potentially the feelings and the emotional side of it is a step too far for now, it is always possible to get there. This is where AI can actually be really handy. So again, just being able to get it out of your head, and the chatbots are actually really effective. You give it the right instructions to help you make sense of it. So doing that verbal download, if you haven't got sort of a trusted human that you can have the conversation with, or your coach or whoever it is, then use the tools that we now have available. You know, they're there.
I think
leverage
it's
it.
Really important. Whilst I'm not personally experienced in unloading on these things into an AI, I think another common thing that we hear from directors in businesses is that the cost of help, whether it be the actual cash outlay or the opportunity cost or the time cost, is something that they couldn't actually afford. But those are really excuses. You know that you need help. You know that help is out there. You know that help is actually available. It doesn't need to be particularly expensive. A conversation with your accountant, a conversation with a family member or a colleague or peer that you trust. Insolvency firms like O'Brien Palmer will give you an hour or two of their time at no charge to help assess your business and give you some advice or discussion around options and challenges that are there. There's heaps of ways that you can get advice and help if you take the time to utilize them. And not all of them need to be expensive or prohibitive. Not all of them require a solid commitment. Sometimes it's just helping you get your thoughts.
For sure.
And confront the reality of a situation. And maybe it's not as bad as you've built up in your head, because we all catastrophize about these things. That is a very common feature of modern life in 2026.
It sure is.
With our doom scrolling and our...
don't even.
Guys, if there's anything that you've heard today that struck a chord, if you think that your business could use the help of somebody like Amanda in terms of working on the culture of your business, the leadership teams of your business, the processes, or even just someone to help you work out what it is that you want out of your business, I'm going to put all of Amanda's details down the bottom here. So please don't hesitate to get in contact with her, check out her website, give her a call for a chat. I can tell you from personal experience, it's been a transformative experience for us at O'Brien Palmer and me personally in working with her. And I highly recommend taking that step outside of your business and your day-to-day experiences to look at it objectively and work out, is there something here that can be improved? Amanda, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate coming along.
You're welcome.
Right, we're all good?
Yeah, let's go.
Rule 1, get your guest's name and business right. Right?
Sorry, but I've got a mouthful of a name.
Can you guys... You know what I'm going to say?
She wants a story.
I want a story. Two very different conversations.
I did try to keep it like not too touchy-feely.
Awesome.
You guys are legends.